Everyone, and welcome to the Password Sniffer project. Since we finished our ARP spoofer, the best idea would be to continue with a project that we can combine with our ARP spoofer in order to be able to do a complete attack. We already know that our ARP spoofer can create man in the middle that allows us to sniff the packets from the target machine that we specify, and right now we need a password sniffer that will be able to extract usernames and passwords from all the packets that flow by. Therefore, let's get this going. Hopefully you're excited, and let's create a new project. Go on File, New Project, and Password Sniffer. Let's call it like that. We want to create it in a separate window. Creating the virtual environment as usual, and for this project we're going to use some libraries that we haven't encountered before. So let's import them straight away. We're going to create our file, new Python file. Now let's call it pass-sniffer.py. Simple as that. We are going to need escapee library, which we used before, so nothing really to explain right here. And we will also need the URL lib library. Alright, and the third library that we're going to need is going to be the RE or the regex library. And the regex library is something that we're going to need in order to extract the usernames and passwords from the entire packet. Alright? Now, our program will have two different functions. One of the functions will parse the packets that we sniff, and the second function will try to extract the username and password from those packets. But before we do any of that, and before we code those two functions, we first of all need to start sniffing for the packets. Now let's imagine that our ARP spoofer is running. So what we will want to do is we will want to try to sniff those packets, and this sniff function is something that exists in escapee, so we don't really need to code it. We simply just specify sniff, and it will gather all the packets on the specified interface. Sounds good, right? So since I said that it will gather the packets on the specified interface, therefore we need to specify the interface. We will select the iFace to be equal to iFace, and we can code up here iFace to be equal to your interface. In my case, that is ETH0. Now, in order to check out what is the name of your interface, you simply just open up your terminal and you can type ifconfig. The interface is the name right here. Since I'm using Ethernet cable on Kali Linux, and this is the actual interface which I'm using to connect to the internet, I will specify this name inside of my program. If you are, for example, using a wireless adapter, you don't want to specify this interface, you want to specify the wireless adapter which you are using to connect to the internet. If you are simply just connecting over the Ethernet cable like me, feel free to specify the Ethernet interface. Alright, simple as that. Let's close this. Now that we got that out of the way, let's continue with our sniff function. The next parameter is going to be prn, which simply means whatever we specify after the equal sign, that function will be used in order to parse the packets that we sniffed using this sniff function. So we're going to create later on a function called packet parser, and the third parameter and last parameter is going to be store to be equal to 0. So we don't want to store anything, we don't want to save it anywhere, we simply just want it to flow by. Alright, so as I mentioned before, there are two functions that we are going to need. The first one will be the packet parser, which we use to parse the packets from our sniff function, as we can see right here. So packet parser. This packet parser will take one parameter, which will be the packet itself, or we can simply type it like this, packet. And the second function would be define get login pass. And this function will also take a parameter which will be, well, for now on we're going to leave it without the parameter, and we're going to add it later on. We created these two functions, all we're left to do is run the code inside them. But let's not get ahead, we're just going to leave them for this video, and right here we're going to add the except statement, of course keyboard interrupt. If we interrupt the keyboard, then we can print, for example, exiting, and we can then sys, or we can simply just exit the program since we don't have the sys library imported. And one more thing before we finish off with this video is that we need to install the scapy library. We know how to do that, pip3 install scapy. And after this downloads, we should be good to go, and we should be ready to code these two functions in the next few videos. So thank you for watching this introductory video on Password Sniffer, and I will see you in the next lecture. Bye! Welcome back. Let's continue with our Password Sniffer. So the first function out of these two, which we mentioned that we are going to need, is this one. We want to first of all parse the packets and filter them, should I say. So we want to filter for the specific packets that might contain the username and password, and then only after this is done, we're going to paste the content of those packets into this get login password function, and in this function we're going to extract the username and password. Alright, so let's start off with the packet parser. First thing that we need to specify right here is we need to check for whether this packet has the TCP layer. Now, we can simply just do that if we specify if packet.hasLayer, and this is a function that exists in scapy. We simply specify in the brackets which layer we want to look for, in our case TCP. Alright? So if packet has this layer, then we're going to filter it forward. There is another layer that it should have, and that is packet.hasLayer raw. And this raw layer is just a sublayer of the TCP layer. So if there is a raw layer, there is for sure going to be a TCP layer. Well, in most cases. Now another thing that we want to specify right here is if it also has the IP layer. Now if these three statements are satisfied, then that is the packet that we are looking for. So we're going to type right here 2 dots, and you might notice that right here these names are red underlined. Well, some of them. Don't worry about that, we're going to worry about that later on. It will most likely even work without us having to fix anything right here, and that is just some problem with the PyCharm itself. So no need to worry about that at the moment. If there is anything that we need to fix later on, we are going to fix it, alright? So now that we got this statement right here, if that statement is fulfilled, what we want to do is we want to extract the body of the packet. Since in the body of the packet there's going to be all the information that we are looking for, such as usernames and passwords. How can we do that? Well, we can simply just specify a variable which will be called body, and that variable will be equal to the string of the packet TCP part. So we select it like this in the square brackets, and then we want to select .payload. Alright? So we're selecting the packet, taking the TCP part, and inside of the payload of the TCP layer, there is going to be a username and password in case the target tried to log into some page. Now what we want to do is we want to send this body to our second function, which is going to be get login pass. So let's call the function get login underscore pass, and we will pass the body straight to that function. So let's go over this once again. We sniff on our interface, which is ETH0, then we check for each and every packet if it has layer TCP, if it has layer raw, and if it has layer IP. If all of these three conditions are met, then we select the body variable to be equal to the payload of the TCP layer. Once we select that, we send this body to our second function, which is get login pass. Now inside of this function, what we need to do is we first of all need to select two different variables. First one is going to be user to be equal to none, and password to be equal to none. Now none simply means that we do not have any value at the moment inside of these two variables, and hopefully at the end of this function we should have the username and password stored right here. So let's end our tutorial here, and we are going to continue in the next lecture with the coding of our two functions. Take care, bye! Welcome back. This is our third tutorial to our password sniffer. And you might notice that I added something right here that we didn't have in the previous video. And those are these two lists. So I added the users fields and the passwords fields. These two lists are going to help us to find for the usernames and passwords inside of the body that we paste to this function. So right here, now that I mentioned body, I will paste it straight away, since in our packet parser function, we do call it as a parameter. Alright? So we're going to check for each and every element from this list if it is located inside of this body, and if it is, we're going to print the username and the password. Now for you don't really have to type all of this if you don't want. You can go to the resources of this project or at the end of this section and download this program and simply just copy and paste these two fields. Alright? So let's get straight into the coding. Now that we have these two fields for all the possible names for the usernames and the passwords, what we can do is we can iterate over each and every element. So for example, let's go over the user fields first. So for login, in user fields, we can simply just do what we're going to do right here is we're going to use regex in order to extract the usernames. Now, I will first type it right here and then I will explain it to you. So I'll create a variable called login_re, standing for regex, and I'm going to call the regex library with the search function. In that function, I'm going to specify the pattern, which will be %s equals, open square brackets, close square brackets, upper sign, then this sign right here, not really sure how it is called, and then at the end we specify a plus. Okay, so this is our pattern, and wait for just a second, I will explain it. We then type %login, and then comma body, and then comma re.ignore case. Okay, so before we continue, I need to explain this line a little bit better. So what we're doing right here is we're creating login.re object. Now, we're calling the re library, which is the regex library, and on this library we are calling the search function. What this search function does is it takes a pattern that we specify, which is this right here, and to explain this pattern you really need to know regex, so if you do know it, that's great. If you don't know it, well then I will leave some resources in the description so you can get more familiar with regex and its patterns. What basically this is the pattern which we are going to use in order to try to get the usernames. The second parameter to this function is the body, and body simply means where are we going to search for the usernames, so we're searching the usernames in body, and the last parameter, which is ignore case, simply means that we don't care about the uppercase and lowercase letters. Okay? Now, this pattern right here, this %s, since that is the first thing, will get replaced with the login. And keep in mind, the login is the iterable and it will be each and every of these elements. So for this example, let's take this element. What we're looking for is something like username equals, and then something right here. This pattern simply specifies something like this. If we find this inside of a body, that means that we successfully found the username and we're going to print this to the screen. Okay, so let's delete this. Now that we got that out of the way, we now need to check whether there is anything stored inside of this login. Since if there is, that means we found the username. So if login_re, then our user variable, which we created at the beginning of the program and set the value of none to it, is going to be equal to login_re.group. And group are just the results that we got from this function right here. Therefore, it will simply just store the username inside of this variable. Alright, so the same thing we need to perform for the passwords as well. So let's go right here for pass field. In pass fields, we're going to create an object once again called pass_re, and we perform the exact same thing. So I'm going to copy this so we don't have to type it twice and paste it right here. Well, not there. We don't want it there. We want it here. Okay, good. Now, the pattern right here will remain the same as for the usernames. Just in our case, what we're searching for is something like this. Password equals and then random password. Okay? So let's delete this. And in order to actually search for a password, we need to replace this login with pass field. Since we are iterating right now over the second list, which is the possible names for the password field. Okay? All of this will remain the same. And now we need to check whether we got this. So if pass_re, then we're going to store in our passwd variable, which is once again at the beginning of this function, and set to none. We will store pass_re dot group. Okay, good. And now at the end, we need to return these two values, so we will specify if user and password. We will return both username and password. Alright, so this is the entire getLoginPass function, and now we are ready to go back to our packet parser function. Now before we close this video, I'm going to just select the username, password to be equal to getLoginPass with the body as a parameter. Since we are returning the two values from this function, therefore we need to set those two values inside of these two values. User will be set inside of a username and password will be set inside of a password. So in the next video we're going to wrap up our program and we're going to go for a first test of it. Alright, so thank you for watching this tutorial and I will see you in the next lecture. Bye! Welcome back. So we've had quite a tough task in the previous few videos, but we managed to get it all to work. Now it's time to wrap up our program and run it for a first test. So what we did for now is we returned the username and password, extracted it from the body and stored it in these two variables. Now what we need to do is we need to print these two variables as a result. So right here, after this, we need to check whether username and password is not equal to none. Oops, seems like we cannot specify two of these variables, so we need to delete this. What we are going to do instead is we are going to store this inside of one variable. Let's call it like this. Now the reason why we are storing it in one variable is because we can use one if statement later on. Even though we are returning two values, this will both be stored inside of a user pass, just as two different elements. Alright, so after that we can check whether if user_pass is not equal to none. And what this simply means, since we set the user and pass to be equal to none, if we don't manage to find any username and password, these two values will remain none and they will be returned as none at the end of the function. Therefore, right here we are checking if user and password is not equal to none and we specify that with this exclamation mark and equal sign. Then what we want to print is parse.unquote, and this is just a way for us to print these two values, so parse.unquote, and we will select the first element of the user pass and we need to select the second element, which would be the password as well. So parse.unquote user_pass and the second element. Okay, so once again, if these two values are not equal to none, we will print the username and password. In any other case, and by in any other case I mean if we encounter any other packet that doesn't satisfy these three statements right here, we're going to simply pass and let that packet go, since it will probably not store any username or any password. Alright, so this should be the entire program. Here it is. Let's see how it runs. If I open up the terminal, clear the screen and run it, You will see it did run successfully. We don't see anything right here, nothing is being printed. So let's check out whether we can get something to print right here. If we open up our Firefox and I simply go to the 192.168.1.1, which is my router's login page, and I go, for example, type hello as a username and world as a password and click on login, you will see right here we do get both username and password. Now the password is encrypted, but that is because of my router security. Therefore, our program successfully works. We do manage to get the username and password. Now let's see on another website as well. Let's go to our good old testphp.phoneweb.com. Here, if you go on the sign up, we will have a page where it will ask us for the username and password. So let's type the username and password right here. Let's go once again with hello and then world. Click on login. And we get both hello and both world in our terminal right here. So our program works correctly. Now, in case you also want to get from which website are these usernames and passwords coming from, which would be a good idea, all you need to do is go down in our packet parser function, and if the packet has these three statements fulfilled, we also want to print packet TCP and then .payload. Alright, so let's go and run it once again and go to Firefox and type, oh, never mind, we will be printing a whole lot more packets than we need, so this actual statement should go here and not here, so we only want to print it if the user and pass is not equal to none. So let's go once again and print it. Now once we reload, we are not getting any random packets, so let's type right here admin and password will be password. Click on OK. We get the username to be admin and the password to be password, and we also get the entire packet above. So now we can see that the login is coming from this website. We also see a bunch of other different information which could be useful to us, but from now on we're only interested in this host information and in these two values, which are username and password. Alright, now that we are sure that our program works and that we can sniff usernames and passwords on different websites, and by the way, keep in mind this will only work on HTTP websites. If you want to sniff the information and passwords over the HTTPS websites, you will also need to run SSL strip on the side. And that will only work for the SSL connections and not for the TLS encryption. Alright? But let's put that on the side. In the next video, we can combine it with our ARP spoofer and see how we can sniff the usernames and passwords on a different machine. The same way we did right now in Kali Linux, just we're going to try to sniff the usernames and passwords on Windows 10 machine. So, thank you for watching this lecture, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! Welcome back, and this is the first video where we're going to test two of our tools together. We're going to test our password sniffer that we coded in this project, and we're going to combine it with our ARP spoofer that we created in the previous section. So, let's see how that will go. First, what we need to do is open up our terminal, and I will go onto the actions and split terminal horizontally. So we will have two of these screens right here. In the first screen, I will navigate to PyCharm, and I will navigate to the password sniffer project. And in the second screen, I will navigate once again to PyCharm and to ARP spoofer project. Alright? So, if I type ls in the ARP spoofer, you will remember that our ARP spoofer code requires us to specify the target IP address and the router's IP address as two arguments to the command. So let's run the ARP spoofer right away. I will type python 3 ARP spoofer 192.168.1.1, and the IP address of my Windows 10 machine is 192.168.1.2. Run this, and this will start working. As we can see, it is not closing, it is sending 2 packets every 2 seconds. If we want to check whether it worked, we can simply just go to the CMD or the command prompt in Windows and type arp-a, and we will see that both of the Kali Linux and router have the same MAC address. Therefore, our ARP spoofing worked. Now, let's see how this will help us to actually sniff the password on Windows 10 machine. Now, if I go to my password sniffer and I simply just run it, so Python 3, password sniffer, as we can see, it seems to work correctly. All we are left to do right now is go on Windows 10 to Google Chrome or any search engine that you're using. Wait for it to open up, and once it opens up, let's first of all go to my router right here. Whoops, it will not connect, because you remember we forgot one thing, so let us just close our ARP spoofer for a second. We actually have to forward our packets first, so let's do that with the command echo1, 2 arrows to the right, /proc/sys/net/IPv4 and /IP_forward. Once we do that, we can run our ARP spoofer once again. Okay, so it is working. Let's go back to our page and try to reload it. Here it is. And if we type some random username, such as for example admin, and password to be password, press on login and go back to our Kali Linux machine, we will get the full packet printed out right here. Here is the username, and the password due to security measures is actually set to be encrypted. And we can also see the actual host or the website to which these 2 fields have been specified. And in this case, it is 192.168.1.1 or our router. Now, if we go on to the different website, which is testphp.vulnweb.com, and we go to the sign up, specify right here admin and then password, click on login, go back to our Kali Linux machine, we will also get that packet as well. Okay, so here it is. Username is admin, password is password. In plain text, we can see it right here. And we can also see where are these fields specified. In our case, they're specified on this website right here. Alright, so our password sniffer works. We combined our 2 tools, our password sniffer and our ARP spoofer, in order to sniff the passwords from the HTTP websites on the different machines on our local network. Now, if you want to do this on multiple targets at once, you can either just upgrade our ARP spoofer to be able to spoof every machine on the local area network, or you can use a different tool with combination with our password sniffer. So you can use a tool called, for example, MITMF, not really sure if it is installed right here. Yeah, you can also use the MITM proxy, but I would advise you to go into the Firefox. If you want to use the real man in the middle and ARP spoofing tool, that comes with a bunch of different options that will help you fully execute your attack, you simply just go and download a tool called MITMF. You would simply just click on this first link, go all the way down, you would clone this page with git clone, then you can go to the installation instructions right here and follow these instructions and these commands in order to install MITMF properly. Once you do that, you can simply just use that tool to perform ARP spoofing and use our password sniffer in order to sniff passwords on every machine on local area network. Okay, so that would be about it for this section. We successfully saw how we can combine these 2 tools, and in the next project we're also going to see another tool that we will create that you can either combine with ARP spoofer if you like, or you can simply just use it on your own with another tool perhaps such as MITMF, or with any other tool that performs man-in-the-middle attack as well. Okay, so thank you for watching this section, and I will see you in the next project. Bye!